Hey guys, it's Lady Hawk. Sorry I haven't been on lately. Been super busy with a lot of things. Trying to get some more stories researched. Also, family life, being sick, stuff like that. So, sorry it took so long. Oh
Not today, say.
no. Don't mind my ringtone, guys. um, anyways, don't mind the bruises. Work. Okay, if anybody knows what I do for work. Yeah. So, today I have a little bit of a history case for you. This is one of my favorites, and it's just because I love history and I love, like, cold cases and crime cases. Like, I love that kind of stuff. That's why I started this, guys. So this for you guys. But this case is a little bit of a history. And the reason I love it is because of the fact that, well, I don't want to tell you. Let's just get into the story, okay? And the case, and I'll kind of let you guys figure it out. Now, this case, due to it being such an old case, there are some things in it that no matter how much research you're going to find and do, and even the case records, which back then they didn't keep very good case records, and that's what I like to try to do. I like to try to pull up the case records, the court hearings, everything like that. Sometimes I can find them, sometimes I can't. Sometimes it's just a big, huge mess to get them. But I do try to report to you guys the best of my knowledge that I can find. And then sometimes, even after I'm done telling you guys about these stories, these cases, I do find more information. I'm like, oh man, I wish I had that to put into my podcast. But it's already sent out there. But like I said, there's a couple cases actually that I will be doing that will be an up-to-date thing. Like, I will tell you guys about them. And then later on, when there's more information coming out about them, or the case is done, because some of my cases that I will be presenting to you guys are cases that are now current, that are being investigated. So of course a lot of the information you can't get because they are not being released to the media. A lot of people can't find the information to leak it even. And even then, when you have leaked information, sometimes it's one of those things that I don't like to follow. I like to follow the actual facts that I find and the actual facts. And some of the facts that I don't even include in here in some of these cases is not just because I don't want to tell you about them. It's just because they are not, they kind of give you more information. And that's why I say, but they're not like huge. But that is one thing, like, I do appreciate when you guys message me and ask more questions. It's because I do have more information on these cases if you want to know more. Maybe you want to make your own thought idea and your own thought process of the case. Message me on the case, on the video, and ask me your questions. And I'm pretty sure I have it in my notes that you are asking, and I can easily give it to you. That way, you're not going off of what I assume or what the jury or the public has assumed, but you can go off of your own thoughts and everything like that, okay? So, like I said, this one's a little bit about a history, so I'm going to kind of there might be some mentioning a little bit here and there of my history, but it's about the case, guys. So, let's go ahead and get started. This one is on Charles Starkweather and Caril and Fugate. Many people know about them, not a lot of people do. But hopefully you know a little bit more, and you'll understand why this case really grabbed me and why I love these kind of cases. Okay? So, as many of you know, and the ones that don't know me, I used to I've worked in corrections for years. I mean, years. And I've worked in 3 different states. I've worked in mainly max male facilities. I don't like working with female inmates. I'd end up in jail probably because I don't have the temperament for them and they're a little bit crazier. But And I've worked with mental health and stuff like that, and mental health inmates that could probably, that even when they are released, if they are ever released, which is very rarely, they never go into society. They go into asylum. So I have a lot of history of a lot of different things, like I've stated before. So, but as like I said, most of you know, I've worked in Oklahoma. And the cool thing about the Oklahoma prison that I worked at is that it housed not just regular GP, which is general population inmates. It also housed some criminally insane inmates and inmates that had such bad behavior that they could never be around other inmates. So we had our GP side, and then we had our behavioral side and our mental health side. Okay, so they were separated by fences, they were separated by gates, they were separated in different buildings, okay? And they had pretty much different officers that could handle them. I worked both GP, behavioral, and mental health because of my background. But with all this, there was also one other side of the prison in its own little area, separate from all the male adult inmates. We had a actual little section of the prison that held male juvenile inmates. Now, this is where we held inmates that were under the age of 18, okay? And yes, there are children, male inmates and stuff like that that have already been sentenced to jail. Some of them are for a few months, some of them are for a few years, some of them are for life. I've met a couple juvenile inmates that were in there for life. If I can recall, the youngest inmate that we had was just 13 years old. When I was there, at least, was just 13. It's sad, honestly, knowing that there are kids out there who have their whole lives ahead of them that just throw it all away and now have to grow up behind bars. And that is one thing every parent fears for their children. I fear about it for my boys like crazy. My daughter not so much because she's a little diva princess. But my two boys, I fear about it, especially my middle boy. He's all boy, like I said. Like, I worry a lot about him. But seeing this and working around that, it kind of intrigued me to learn more about other juvenile cases. So, like I do, I started looking into many other cases, children under the age of 18. Being sentenced to prison. And I came across one case that was really interesting to me. And that was the case that I'm going to tell you guys about of Charles Starkweather and Caril and Fugate. And the reason it interested me so much is not just because of the background of the crime, but also that Caril Ann would be, and still is, to this day, the youngest female to ever be convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Now, remember that she was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. But at the end of the thing, I'm going to kind of tell you, at the end of this podcast, I'm going to kind of tell you a little bit of change that happened. But she is still the youngest convicted and sentenced female. Now, like I stated before, I really, after I tell you about the case, I really want to know what you guys think about it, because to this day, there is still a lot of skepticism behind it. Whether she did it, whether she didn't do it, whether she was coherent during it, there's a lot of different things that make it very skeptical, along with the media and personal opinion. So please, 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 please let me know what you guys think about it. But to kind of get in a little bit of background, Charles Starkweather was born in 1938 in Lincoln, Nebraska. His family didn't have much at the time, but they still managed to grow up healthy and loved. As a young boy, Charles was a very small child. He had bow legs, a slight speech impediment, and was even considered to be slow with only an IQ of about 70. And as a teenager, they would find out that part of this reason he was slow was because he was extremely nearsighted. Charles couldn't even read the top letter of the eye chart. That's how bad it was. And everybody knows, everybody can read that unless you're legally blind. And pretty much he would have been legally blind in today's age. But due to all of this, that he had the bow-leggedness, the scrawniness, the nearsighted, the IQ that was really low, he was bullied pretty bad by other children in school. But everything kind of changed for him, okay? Once he got to high school. So Charles started taking a gym class. He started getting stronger and building more body mass. So he wasn't as scrawny anymore. And he was no longer the small little meek child that people could push around. And because of this, Charles would start to seek his revenge on those who bullied him. So in the end, it turned him into a bully himself, which it sucks going from, like, it's good that your child's no longer being bullied, but knowing that your child has gone through something like that and is willing to put it onto other people to mask their pain, it's unbearable to think about and unbearable for a parent to feel. When he started coming to himself, Charles ended up becoming obsessed, guys, with a very popular heartthrob of their time. And to this day, I know a lot of people that still think of this guy as a heartthrob. James Dean. Now, this all came after he watched Rebel Without a Cause. And after seeing it, Charles started dressing and doing his hair and even imitating some of the actor's movements, the way he talked, the way he looked. Like, he started imitating the actor, becoming the actor. When Charles was 18, he would actually get a girlfriend. Okay? But a girlfriend, and he was introduced to this new girlfriend from the girlfriend of his best friend. And when they introduced him, the girl was a very young, beautiful 13-year-old girl. And this was Caril and Fugate. Remember, he's 18, she's 13. I mean, when I was younger, I liked older men too. And back then, this is not abnormal. It's normal, pretty much. So today, it'd probably be frowned upon a little bit here and there, but back then, it wasn't. Now, their stations, yes, that might have been kind of frowned on. But we'll get into that. But when Charles met Caril, the two fell madly in love with each other and became inseparable. I mean, guys, really quick, wherever you saw one, there was another. And since Caril was still in junior high, Charles would decide that he can't be away from her. And so he would take a job at Western Union newspaper warehouse as a truck loader, just so he could be close to her at all times. Like, he had to be next to her. It was kind of like an obsessive, controlled kind of relationship. Nowadays, it'd be like a controlling relationship. Every minute they could, Charles and Carly were together. Charles even tried teaching Carly to drive his Ford. It was a 1949 Ford. And while in one of the times that he was trying to teach her to drive it, Caril would end up wrecking it. Now, Caril, this kind of relationship was kind of frowned upon because, like I said, they're stationary. So this crash that happened would, like, infuriate Charles's father, Guy Starkweather. And due to the nature of Charles's behavior, because he was already starting to kind of get out there and try to do all these bad things, smoking and everything like that, he was James Dean. And the lack of responsibility, Guy ended up kicking Charles out of the house. Okay? And from there, Charles ended up quitting his job at the newspaper warehouse and started working as a garbage collector. Now, he would go on to say that while he worked there as a garbage collector, he would use his roots, okay? He would use the routes that he took for his job. He would plan bank robberies in his head. Like, he would think of what he would need to do. Like, where is it positioned? What's the busiest time of the day? And where the security... Like, he would memorize everything and start planning bank robberies in his head. he would never follow through with them, but to me right there, it was kind of like, I believe that was the true nature of Charles Starkweather starting to come through. Because shortly after his stint and working as a garbage collector and thinking all these things, on November 30th, 1957, at the age of 19, Charles would go and not just plan a crime, but he would commit one. So Charles stopped at a gas station, okay? And this was, like I said, on November 30th, 1957. And he saw this cute little stuffed toy dog that he wanted to buy for Caril. And he was so excited. He walked up to the register and he was so excited that he even exchanged really nice words with the manager, 21-year-old Robert Colvert. But the excitement didn't last long. When he realized that he didn't have enough money to pay for this small little tiny gift. And when he asked Colvert to do store credit to where he could pay him back when he got paid, and he promised that he would pay Colvert back, Colvert just took the stuffed animal out of his hand, said nope, and sent him on out, like kicked him out of the store. Now, after something like that, most of us, yes, we'd be a little embarrassed, but we would just go on and say, next time we have a little bit more money, we'll go in there and get it. But Charles's thought process was a little different, and he would return the next day. But it was not going to be this excited time. It was not going to be this casual, nice words with the manager ordeal. Because the next day, on November 31st, at around 3 a.m., Charles returned to the gas station where Robert Colvert worked, and he walked in. Now, this is where he kind of, like, you could see that he was planning something, okay? Because he would walk in and buy a pack of cigarettes. Then he would just turn around and walk out. Then he'd come in a second time, guys, and he would buy another pack of cigarettes. And it's like, I don't know. It was just weird. Because then he would come in a third time and he would purchase a small pack of gum. So he bought 2 packs of cigarettes on 2 different occasions. And then the third time he just bought a pack of gum. It was almost to me like he was trying to build up himself to try to do what he ultimately came there to do. Because then on the 4th and final time he entered the store, he would come in with a bandana over his face so that you couldn't see him, and a hat on, thinking that it covered his whole face. And he was carrying a shotgun. That's when he held Colvert at gunpoint and forced him to open the store safe. There, he would take the money out of the safe. From there, you would think, okay, well, he's done. He's just going to grab that toy, grab whatever else he wants, and leaves. But no, he does not stop there. Charles then tells Colvert to get into his own car, into Colvert's own car, the one he drives every single day. Told him to get into his own car and drive himself and Charles to a remote area. And it was nearby, but it was completely, nobody was around. There was nothing there. And that's when Charles would turn and shoot Colvert once in each leg and then once in the head. It was kind of like he was playing with him, like, oh, you can't run, so I'm going to shoot you in your legs, and then I'm going to take you out of your misery. Very satanic, like demonic in a way, very diabolical. Shortly after completing his robbery, he would later tell his girlfriend Caril about it. And Caril would later on say that he did not tell her he had shot and killed Colvert, but we really don't know if that's the truth or not. I mean, I'm sure that she would have known that he did do something to Colvert when people started coming around and asking questions and things like that, and especially after the body was found. But again, remember, guys, she's only 13, okay? She's 13 at this time. But like I said, there's a lot of skepticism about Caril, okay? Caril's one of those, little things out there with a question mark. But anyways, after the robbery, Charles ended up losing his job and was evicted from the place where he was staying because he couldn't pay the rent, of course, because he lost his job. So on January 21st, 1958, Charles made his way to Carol Ann's family's home. But this wasn't just his normal, hey, how you doing? I want to see my girlfriend kind of visit. Because on this day, he would enter the Fugate home with a rifle and ammo. Nobody knows what really led to this, if maybe Carol asked him to do it, or maybe it was kind of like, I gotta go on a run ordeal after his bank thing, or his grocery store murder. We don't really know what made the change in this. But now, this is also where the events that happened after are unknown. Exactly what happened due to there being different stories. But this is what the evidence had showed, and that this is how it kind of went due to kind of what their evidence showed back then, okay? So on this day, Charles entered the home where he would shoot Carol Ann's 57-year-old stepfather, Marion Bartlett, in the head. Just shoot him, get him out of the way. From there, he would beat and shoot 36-year-old Velda Bartlett, which is Carol's mother, in the face. Now, no one was safe during this. No one in the house. Because after that, Charles would then go to stab and strangle little 2-year-old Betty Jean, which was Carol Ann's half-sister. Like I said, this is where the story gets a little foggy. They would go to say that Charles would bury the stepfather and little sister in the backyard, but it's said that he took Carol Ann's mother to the outhouse, and that's where he sexually assaulted her and left her body. Which, that is disgusting if it's true, and it would take a truly evil person to commit this heinous crime. Like, commit the crime, period, but to do something like that, even, like, no. But Charles would then end up placing a sign, after he committed all this, Charles would place a sign outside of the door, of the front door, and saying that the whole family was sick and had the flu. And back then the flu was really rapid, guys. Remember, a lot of people were dying from the flu. And then him and Carol Ann ended up staying in that house for a few days. Like, weird. During this time, it is said that Charles had told Carol Ann that her family had been kidnapped. But now as an adult, when I think about this, I'm like, okay, that's weird, and I'm sure, like, it wouldn't make sense because there's blood all over the house. Of course, there has to be blood with all the shotgun shooting, because everybody knows when you're shot with a shotgun, it expands, okay? Whether it's buck or bird, like, there's still going to be a splatter. Especially if it's a headshot, there's going to be a lot of brain matter, a lot of stuff, especially depending on the range where he shot them. But, and another thing that you would kind of think of as an adult is, why would the whole family be kidnapped but Carol Ann's safe? Like, you would think they would maybe kidnap the girls, the younger girls, Carol and Betty Jean, the 2-year-old little half-sister, and then maybe hold them for ransom and have Marion and Velda pay. But no, the whole family besides Carol was supposedly kidnapped. But like I said, as a 13-year-old girl who is in love and would believe anything and not think twice of it, who knows? But I have honestly no idea what to think about that part. But the thing is it would get even more twisted later on. So on January 27th, 5 days after Carol Ann's family was murdered, Carol Ann's grandmother would start wondering why she hadn't heard from the family, which was rare because she always talked to the family and she would see the grandkids, stuff like that. Like, it was just really out of place after 5 days of everybody having the flu. Like, she was really worried. Okay, if they have the flu, did they get better? Are they laying in there really, really sick? Do they need help? So Carol Ann's grandmother would call the police. But by the time the police arrived at the Fugate / Bartlett's home, Charles and Carol were gone. They were just gone. The couple were actually headed to a small farm in Bennett, Nebraska. And the small farm was owned by August Meyer, a 72-year-old man by himself. All he had was his farm, him, and his dog. There, after shooting and killing Mayer and his dog, they also killed his dog. They would take Mayer's truck down the road, and they were going to drop Mayer's body off in an abandoned storm shelter near there, but their car, sorry, I said truck earlier, it's his car. His car got stuck in the mud, and so they needed a new car to get away. So they started walking down the road, and that's where they came across two teenagers driving. 17-year-old Robert Jensen and 16-year-old Caril King. Now, after forcing the young couple to drive to the abandoned storm shelter, Robert would be shot 6 times in the abdomen he was shot 6 times in the head with a handgun. And Caril would be sexually assaulted. She would also be stabbed in the abdomen and pubic area. And after all that torture and pain, she'd be shot once in the head. Their bodies were found the next day in Mayer's car along with Mayer's body. Now, with all this going on, I'm sorry, where's Carol Ann during all of this? And why would you stay with a man that obviously is dangerous and watch him sexually assault another woman, your boyfriend, do this heinous crime to another woman? It's weird, okay? To me, I would think maybe, my thought on that process, guys, my opinion is that maybe she wasn't around, or maybe due to the way that Caril King was stabbed in the abdomen and pubic area, maybe after he sexually assaulted her, maybe she got upset and killed her. I mean, it is known that women that are enraged for infidelity and stuff are known to attack more intimate areas. So maybe that's what happened. I don't know. Evidence says, I'm just telling you what the evidence shows. That was my personal opinion. I don't know what you guys think, but it could be a possibility. But she would try to say later on, Carol Ann would try to say later on that she went with him because he had told her that if he went with her went with him, that she would be safe, he wouldn't hurt her. But I don't believe that story at all. There's multiple times she had a chance to run away in my head. Anyways, from there, they would take Robert's car and start heading towards the wealthier part of Lincoln, Nebraska. Once Charles and Ann arrived in Lincoln, that's where they would attack a wealthy industrialist's home. That would be 47-year-old Chester Lore Ward. Okay? But when the couple would arrive at the Ward's house, Chester was nowhere to be found. So the only ones that were home at this time was his 46-year-old wife, Clara Ward, and their 51-year-old maid, Lillian Fincy. But instead of waiting for him to show up and everything like that, they didn't stop there, okay? They would then start completing their plan in a different way. They would stab Mrs. Ward's neck and chest repeatedly, guys, repeatedly. And then, after seeing them stab Mrs. Ward, they would force Lillian Fancy to cook them breakfast. And then, after she cooked them breakfast, they would tie her to the bed and stab her to death. Along with this, they even killed one of the 2 household dogs that were inside. So they're not just going after people, they're going after animals. Because remember, they killed the farmer's dog, mayor's dog, and now they've killed another dog, but for some reason they left another dog alive. I don't know, but from me, they're just clearing out everything. There's no witnesses, nothing. From there, they would wait. And they would wait until Mr. Ward would return home. And it wouldn't be till late in the evening that he would return home. And the moment he got into the house, they surprise attacked him and shot him to death immediately. They then would steal the Wards' Packard, which is their car. When the bodies of the Wards were found, a mass manhunt started, where the police would go house by house searching for the couple. The FBI and National Guard were even called in to assist, guys. The mayor had even offered $1,000 reward, which today that would equal about $12,000. So remember, $1,000 is about $12,000 today. So that's a lot of money. And since Charles and Carol Ann knew that the officials would be looking for the Packard, they were like, okay, we need to get rid of this thing. So that's when they came across 37-year-old Merle Collison, who was a traveling salesman. So he lived and worked outside of his car. Like, his car was his life, right? And he was on the side of the road. By now, they had traveled all the way to, quite a ways. They were already over by Douglas, Wyoming, okay? So they had traveled from Lincoln, Nebraska to over towards Douglas, Wyoming. They were headed up to Wyoming. That's when they would shoot and kill Collison, and they took his car, his Buick. Now, the thing is with Collison's car, there had been a parking brake on it. And, back then the parking brakes were a little bit different than ours. But he had a parking brake on it, and Charles couldn't figure it out. Like, he could not figure out how to get the car to move. So that's when a passerby saw that they needed assistance. And so he would try to go over and help them, and instead, Charles would then threaten him with a knife. Now, as he's threatened this passerby that is willing to help them pretty much rob this car, steal this car, thinking it's theirs, a sheriff deputy saw what was all going on, saw the situation, saw Charles, everything like that, and called for backup. And then when Charles saw the officer, that's when the pursuit started, okay? During this time, Carol jumped out of the car, crying and screaming and yelling all dramatic that Charles had killed someone. Oh my God, he killed someone. I didn't know he could do stuff like this. Like, dramatic. And Charles would then, instead of taking the Buick, would go back and steal the Packard, because that one he could drive. That one didn't have the parking brake on it. So he would get into the Packard and start towards Douglas. Keep going. He was going to go all the way. So he started towards Douglas, where they originally started to go, Douglas, Wyoming. And the chase was on. Police were driving, there was shooting, it was the old time kind of thing, shooting as they're driving, sticking their heads out the windows, stuff like that, crazy, okay? Well, when Charles was fired on by the police, a bullet ended up going through the windshield of the car and cut him, right on the top of his ear. And now at this time, Charles, not being very smart, thought that he was seriously injured, thought he was going to die. And so he pulled over and surrendered just so he could get medical attention. I don't know what his thought process was on that, but apparently not very smart, because he just stopped and said, I need help, I'm going to die. Because the bullet grazed his ear, thinking he was shot in his head, everything like that. And I don't know if he was planning on trying to make a run after that whole ordeal. What? I don't know. But it would turn out that the couple were both tried in Nebraska, okay? So at first, when they were questioning Charles, he would try to say that he forced Carol to go with him, but with the interrogations going, his story would change. And it kept changing until finally his very last interrogation, and the interrogations that preceded that one and everything, his very last final comment on it was that Carol Ann was willing and to go with him, and that she even committed some of the murders. Like I said, I thought that maybe she committed the one with the sexual assault victim, Carol King. But I don't know, because it never really states. She got tried for something else. So after he said that she even was willing to go and committed some of the murders, Carol Ann would say that would like literally insist that she was held against her will. Now, after looking at the evidence, they found that Carol Ann could have left at any point in time. So they figured, okay, she was part of it. So they ended up sentencing her to life in prison at the age of 14. Was what made her the youngest convicted murderer and sentenced to life in prison at the age of 14, guys. She was 14. Charles was only tried for the murder of Robert Jensen, okay, and sentenced to death. And at noon on June 25th the following year, Charles, at the age of 19, was placed in an electric chair and killed by electric chair, okay? Carol Ann ended up serving 18 years. Out of a life sentence, she served 18 years and was released in 1976 for good behavior. That don't happen now, guys. You get sentenced to life, you get sentenced to life. There's no good behavior, nothing like that. So I don't know how it went on back then, but okay. That was back then. Like I said, this was in 1976 that she was released for good behavior, okay? After her release, though, Carol Ann lived a normal life. She actually did. Like, her crime was done. She never committed another crime. She would live in Hillside, Michigan. And then in 2007, she would marry a man named Frederick Clare. Now, I'm not going to say what my thoughts on this is, but you guys can kind of insinuate on your own. Frederick Clare was later killed in a wreck in 2013, and Carol Ann was with him, but she ended up surviving with some serious injuries. She needed surgery and stuff like that, but her new husband had died. Now, like I said, many people are on the fence about this case, okay? We don't really know how much of Carol Ann's story is true and how much Charles Starkweather's is true, but according to what I could find, Carol Ann was given a lie detector test and she passed it with flying colors, guys. Like, I know there are people that can pass lie detector tests, because it reads your heart rate, your blood pressure, like it reads everything, and your breathing rate, everything like that. And so if that changes, that means usually you lied, there's a spike. But she was able to pass it with flying colors. I do think that Carol Ann did assist in the murders and was well aware of everything that was going on. But as a 13-year-old girl, she didn't process everything the same way. And because she was in love with this guy, her first love, pretty much, Charles Starkweather was her first love. She just kind of went with it. And everybody knows at that age, at 13, you shouldn't even be in a relationship pretty much, because at 13, your brain is not fully developed. You can't really process things the way you should. So, but at the same time, you can also look at it as Stockholm syndrome. That's very true. Because it could have been a factor, which I don't know honestly, but I really don't think anyone ever will know the true story about this. Even though there was books published, there was a TV show, she's been questioned. She stuck by her story pretty strongly and won't give too much detail. And of course, we can't get any more detail from Charles because he's dead. And there was no witnesses left alive. So we just have to go by the evidence. I really wish we would know the full story, but I don't think we ever will. But, like I said before, guys, please tell me what you guys think and share some ideas on this with me. I'd love to hear what y'all think, and I'd love to see what you guys conclude with this. But that is the case of the youngest convicted and tried female murder, Caril Fugate, at the age of 13. But until next time, guys, I hope you guys stay blessed, and I'll see you around.